Greetings. It's Monday, January the 12th, in the already very eventful year of 2026. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Monday Morning Report. You can always learn a lot when it's quiet, when you don't hear something, when you hear silence as opposed to noise, when someone is talkative as opposed to keeping things to themselves, when nations are boisterous and arrogant and others are just playing their cards close to their chest. Well, we're in a world right now where that's going on. Silence when there should be a lot of noise. I'm speaking, of course, of the events going on in the Middle East right now, namely Iran. What could prove to be the single most major cataclysmic shift in power since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. But we're not hearing much about it, especially from the mainstream media. Oh, they're off talking about other stuff, including that nonsense in Minnesota involving the woman who got herself shot by the ICE agent. I'm not going to go into that right now because, frankly, nobody's interested in looking at things. In fact, they're interested in their own narrative to drive their own points. So I'll deal with that at another time. What's going on in Iran is far more important and far more potential is at play here. Potential for disaster, but also potential for a new birth of freedom for just about everybody on the planet. Now, first off, I remember quite vividly in 1979 when a lot of the liberals, and I don't mean the communists, I mean liberals, very liberal Iranians, very liberal Americans, of course, being championed by Jimmy Carter, cursed be his name, who saw to it that the ruler of a rather progressive Middle Eastern country at the time, the oldest civilization that's been ongoing, except for China, the Shah of Iran was overthrown and replaced with this monster that has led to 47 years of horror and terror and global terrorism of all kinds. It led to 9/11. It led to all of the bad stuff that's been going on in our world. Even led to October 7th in Israel. No, the Islamic fundamentalist state is truly one of the more evil institutions that has arisen on our planet in recent decades, if not centuries. And a lot of people are not really putting that in perspective too much right now. The people of Iran have risen up in a way that few people in human history have ever done. And I've been getting my information from very, very good sources. And it's shocking that all the major news networks, CNN, ABC, NBC, all the other stuff, even Fox News, have really not been covering that. They're still calling it a bunch of protests. This is revolution and civil war. Hundreds of people, if not thousands, have been killed, murdered, since most of them, if not all of them, were not armed. Depending on the numbers, and I doubt very much there's an official tally being taken. It could be a few hundred, it could be up to 30,000. We really don't know. But these are people who are calling to that ancient right to be free. Now, Donald Trump promised them that he would help them. They took that to heart. Americans might not realize it, but in much of the world, we're still honored and considered an honorable country, although I would say that isn't necessarily as earned as it once was. And that has driven them on. And every night I have been just watching the news, hoping that the U.S. would be doing something to seal the deal on this revolution. Because in reality, revolutions do not succeed, almost never, unless there is an outside intervention. The American Revolution, War of Independence, in the late 18th century. That was helped with France. We wouldn't have been able to win without France. We wouldn't be who we are today without France. There are many other examples, but what's going on here? How come they haven't been hit by the rather competent and capable U.S. military? Well, remember what I said about silence? There are two major players on the world stage that are not saying anything and have a vested interest in the status quo of Iran remaining in the Middle Ages, and that is Russia and China. Now, Russia is pretty buddy-buddy with Iran. They have a mutual defense treaty of sorts. Iran's been supplying all sorts of high-tech weaponry that they produce, drones, that the Russians have been using on the Ukrainians. Quite a bit. And China, although it's not generally known, has all sorts of deals that they've signed with Iran, including running their ports. Yes, running the oil facilities, running the trade facilities. Chinese are big on controlling port facilities. You can ask anyone in Long Beach, California, but I digress. Both of these countries have remained quite quiet, but they do not want to see the Iranian people free. They're more concerned about their own interests at the expense of other peoples who never did them any harm. But the Americans are not all that different. We've let a lot of people down over the decades, and we will pay that price. In fact, we're paying for the fact that we were not helping the Russians after the fall of the Soviet Union. Had we done that, had we exercised that bit of humanity that we used to be famous for, well, I don't think we'd be having all the troubles we're having now. In fact, I would pretty much bet anything on it. No, what happened is when the Americans started talking about helping the Iranian people, the Russians, under Vladimir Putin, launched one of their intermediate ballistic missiles, a hypersonic missile, which went at speeds anywhere from 10,000 kilometers an hour to 25,000 kilometers an hour, depending on the reports. I don't think anyone's really sure. All that we are sure of is it happened very quickly from the time it launched to the time it hit targets in Ukraine, very accurately, and there's nothing that can stop it. That sounds like a shot across the bow, so to speak. And that probably was delivered so that the United States would not interfere with Iran. Now, the Iranian people are still fighting, but that's not going to last forever. They're being slaughtered, and there's a lot of video out there about that. At the same time, the mainstream media throughout the West, and that includes the once honorable BBC, they're not covering this. They're covering it as disturbances. It's full-blown civil war. It is full-blown overthrow the monsters. One of the interesting tactics that the Iranians now have is they're going after the Revolutionary Guard. If you know who those guys are, that's like their equivalent of the Schutzstaffel, the SS, and they're the ones that are loyal unto death to the regime. Well, they're painting their houses with marks and they're going after them. It's getting very bloody and very brutal and very monstrous. But that's what happens when human beings are pushed into a corner and there's no place to go but right at those that are doing the pushing. Something to think about, those of you people in other countries that are doing the same thing to us here in the West. But as far as Iran is concerned right now, they are waiting on the U.S. to take action. What's actually going on behind the scenes? Only one can guess at. But Donald Trump has put the credibility of the United States and its people and its national honor on the line. Once he made that promise, he has to carry through with it. Because if this revolution does not succeed, the Iranians will be slaughtered in ways that made World War II look pale in comparison. He talked about negotiating with the Iranians this morning, or he brought it up that they want to negotiate. You can't negotiate with monsters. You can only kill them. You can only exterminate them. You can only eradicate them. People have said in the past, well, I'm not for war with Iran, and I'm not, because war is usually involving the general population. But now the Iranian monsters that run that country are vulnerable and they're weak. And now is the time to hit them. Otherwise, we are going to pay a horrifying price. Our children and our grandchildren will. Now, the last thing that Russia wants is for Iran to become allied with the United States again. And Israel. Israel has a lot to play in this. Because, well, they don't want any more bases on their borders. You see, this is where long-term strategy is important. By pushing along with NATO, which should have been dissolved back in the early 1990s and reconstituted into something else, well, yeah, we're paying the price for that now as well. It's very important to utterly and completely destroy the Islamic Republic of Iran, the people that run it, and replace it with a more sane government. This is a time in which regime change is needed. It's needed for our own protection. It's needed for the protection of the entire world. These are people that want to build nuclear weapons. These are people that have been funding terrorist attacks throughout the planet for decades. And there's people right now dying in the streets because they believe in the word of the United States and in the need to be free. You can't sit by and let this happen without taking action. And you can't negotiate with monsters any more than you can negotiate with cancer. You have to utterly and completely destroy it. This is a fork in the road that is, well, it's hard to imagine that it actually is here. And I hope that the people behind the scenes who are doing wheeling and dealing and negotiating with people like Russia and China know what they're doing. I don't think Russia or China are going to go to war over this. But this is a time of great miscalculation being a possibility. The one thing that is certain is that no matter how long people are oppressed, no matter how brutally people are kept down, they eventually rise up and fight back. Not everyone's complacent. The Iranians have basically lost everything. Their money's worthless. Food is a luxury. It's gotten insane. There are millions of people fighting right now in what is making the fall of the Berlin Wall look almost tame. So this is a time for people to make their voices heard, even small ones. Contact your members of Congress if you're in the United States. If you're in the United Kingdom or Canada, Australia, New Zealand, or other countries, contact what representatives you have. Tell them that this cannot be allowed to go away. It's hard to believe that this is happening right now. And I think that every day that is delayed in helping the Iranian people win their independence, it will drop exponentially as a possibility it will happen, because if it doesn't happen now, it never will. And one of the world's most brilliant civilizations, which if it had been allowed to continue 47 years ago, would have been a regional superpower, economically, probably far more than militarily. And the world would have been a much more prosperous and peaceful place. No, I hope President Trump has the wisdom and the smart people around him to make this one count. The Iranian people cannot be allowed to fail in their quest for a new, sane, independent country. We all are betting on it. And you know something? Right now, we're all Iranians. Let that sink in. That's it for today. If you appreciate my work, please like, subscribe, and share. Share with your friends. Share with your enemies, but not too much. Remember, they're still enemies, and they're still out there. I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I'm up on X. My handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. And please consider a paid subscription or donation. It does help keep the lights on, the headlights on in the car, and the gas tank filled. This podcast originates at Substack. My handle there is aureliancolumn.substack.com. Until we meet again, remember, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and remember Clown World, the deep state, and all those religious monsters that head up the Islamic Republic of Iran must be destroyed. Good day.